Hi, hello, welcome back to my place on the internet. My name is Amanda and today I am walking you through everything I read for winter 2026. This video is my official entrance into BookTok or BookTube or whatever it's called here. There is a part of me that does not want to make this video because it's stupid, but I'm making myself do it anyway because really I just want to catalog this for my future self. So hello to future Amanda, who I know is probably watching this right now. I do not have all the books that I have read so far because a lot of them were library books that I temporarily borrowed. I also listened to some audiobook versions, which is kind of crazy because past Amanda never would have considered an audiobook a real book. The very first book that I read this year was The Bell Jar. I have had this book for a while, since July 2024 apparently. I think the reason I had been putting off reading this for so long was that I had heard a few people say that you have to be in the right mindset to read it, like you have to be doing pretty well in your life, pretty stable, and especially as someone with a past of like depression, I was a little bit worried this would wreck me, and I'm happy to say that it did in fact wreck me, but not in a way that caused any instability or chaos in my actual life, which is what we love to happen. Or maybe I just love when a book devastates me in the best possible way, the most satisfying way. And that was kind of what this book was. As someone who's read other collections of Sylvia Plath, I'm obviously a poet myself, I went into this knowing it was going to be beautifully written. I think this book is emblematic of something I see in a lot of novels written by primarily poets, where the descriptions of the world and the perspectives are so unique and so rich and vivid in language and imagery. A lot of poetic techniques get used. I think that's a contributing factor to why so many people resonate with this book, is that the way of looking at common or mundane aspects of the world, they're put into such a fresh perspective where they sound totally different and they completely sparkle and come to life in their own way, even if it's something as simple as like going to dinner or taking a cab. The language is pure genius, and I think the story really gives light to, especially at this time, issues that were not allowed to be discussed in any capacity. I found it a very, very accurate depiction of depression as someone who had depression for like 8 years, and it made me reconceptualize how I think about depression in my own life. Literally a life-changing book. I think everyone should read it. Obviously, there were some concerns with some of the racial elements of this book, and I'm not going to deny that that isn't the case. There are some problematic aspects as well, but I think that there can be nuance and we can have a balance of acknowledging all the amazing, life-changing parts of this book while also being aware of the bad too. Next, I listened to an audiobook called Women Who Run with the Wolves. I decently liked this one. Maybe the fact that I listened to it as an audiobook made it a different experience. I'm not really sure. I love the concept of reframing women's experiences as, you know, wolves, as the bare bones of society, as these indigenous keepers of knowledge. But at some point it did feel a little bit repetitive to me. I think it's definitely a good listen. I think listening to it made for a great experience. Especially there's parts where there's stories and tales and myth that's kind of dived into a little bit. So I think listening to that made it come to life in a new way. When I initially finished it, I thought pretty highly of it, but as time went on and I started reading other books, I feel like it just hit me that I didn't really remember a lot from my experience with this book, and to me that's a sign that it wasn't impactful enough, that I forgot a lot of elements of it. They're not stuck with me. Like with The Bell Jar, I still think of The Bell Jar very regularly. But with this book, it just hasn't stuck with me in that same way. And because of that, I would say it's decently good, but maybe not something I would revisit. I'm not going to spend much time talking about this one, but I did listen briefly to the full audiobook for INFJ 101, How to Understand Your INFJ Personality and Thrive as the Rarest MBTI. This one was released in 2023, but it still kind of felt a little bit outdated because INFJ is not the rarest type anymore from what I could find. I don't even know if I fully believe in all of the personality types. I am open to that kind of thing and learning about new perspective, even if it's not completely proven by science now, but I definitely don't trust a lot of the archetypes as much as I would something that is fully backed by science. This was a good audiobook listen for when I'm going to bed. I think some parts did provide a good frame of reference for things that maybe I thought only I experienced, but I learned were common to the INFJ personality type overall. So it wasn't a bad listen. It was fun, it was good, it was informative. I think the book delivered what it promised, but I just wasn't into it as much. Next, I listened to I'm Glad My Mom Died. I have been hearing for like years about this book, so I finally decided, you know what, let me listen to the audiobook. And all I can say is I cannot believe I did not read this earlier. I really admire the work that Jennette McCurdy did to get a consistent voice and tone and have her writing kind of evolve in the way that it does as someone who wasn't originally formally trained in writing in any capacity. Even as someone who has an MFA in writing, I think it's proof that you don't necessarily need an MFA to be successful in your writing. I really love the story. I think some parts were hard to hear, especially around like the eating disorder topic, since I personally myself have had an eating disorder in the past. It was a little bit uncomfortable to hear some of the specifics and how her eating disorder would manifest. But I also think that was the point of this memoir, to take readers into that uncomfortable and kind of expose a lot of what was happening behind the scenes when everything looked perfect on the outside. So in that regard, I think it was very well written. The direct language that got straight to the point. It worked beautifully in telling this complex, detailed story. Directly after that, and to start the month of February, I read Jennette's newest book, a novel called Half His Age. I was really excited to read this because I had heard her on a podcast kind of go over the ideas about dating someone who's double your age, and I know Demi Lovato has made a song about that, and so many people have been outspoken about their experiences in those types of situations. So I thought it was a very important topic that impacts so many young women and girls, unfortunately. And I think this book made me equally uncomfortable in some aspects as her memoir did, which is, I think, the point she was trying to make. The portrayal of some of the scenes, they were very intentional, they were very well written. It did not hook me as much as her memoir did, I will say that. I'm usually not as big into novels in general. I'm more of a poetry and nonfiction person, but overall I did stay hooked decently well. I'd say I'm not the most captivated, but decently I was hooked. It's kind of one of those books where I feel like I wouldn't maybe recommend it to everyone I meet, but if someone was already reading it, like, I would have good things to say. After this, I rented a copy of Hekate by Nikita Gill, and I read the physical copy of this. It's a pretty big book. So Nikita Gill is a poet. I read a few of her collections years and years ago when I was like first starting to get into poetry. I did not previously know a lot of information about Hekate's story and the myths and everything like that, and I think this collection is perfect to bridge that gap between people who have a little bit of knowledge but they're interested in the spirituality, because this collection takes us through a chronological journey of Hekate from a young godling to a full-grown goddess. All of the things that happen in her story, it takes us through all of those poem by poem, and it details her interactions with other gods and goddesses. It uses common archetypes such as war, grief, loss, womanhood, coming of age. A lot of those archetypes are told through Hekate, and I think that's what makes it so universally relatable while also being very specific and obviously touching upon real aspects of the myth and legends surrounding Hekate. I was honestly blown away because as a poet who reads many poetry collections, I've never in my life seen a poetry collection structured like this. It's rare in general to see a poetry collection this long. I think it was around 250 to over 300 pages. And a lot of publishers will only allow up to 100 pages or maybe up to 120 pages max. I was honestly a little bit worried when I first picked up the book from my local library because I was not expecting it to be so big. But the poems were easily captivating, and because they told a chronological story, it kept the reader hooked. I feel like things progressed at a very even pace where it wasn't going too slow, it wasn't going too fast. It made perfect sense. The pacing, the flow, the format. I just think the concept in general is so cool, to write a poetry collection from the perspective of a goddess, going through the chronological story of the myths. That is a genius idea. Next, I reread You Are Here, Poetry in the Natural World, which was edited by Ada Limón. Every poem is by a different poet in this collection, and they all have to do, obviously, with the natural world, with nature. I first read this collection in, I think, 2024. Someone from my MFA program had gifted me this. I am such a big Ada Limón fan. When my FABLE book club decided to read this, I knew I had to reread this because it's been a couple years. We're just going into spring now at the time that I'm filming this. So I thought it would be a perfect time to read all about the natural world. I love this collection so much. There's so many pages that I have bookmarked to come back to later. I honestly really liked the anthology format because it made things very interesting. There's some poems I connect to way more than others because obviously each poem is by a different poet. And in general, I just think it gave so many diverse perspectives on the natural world in general, because for this one, there wasn't one set theme or idea. So everyone had their own spin on the natural world. So I would highly recommend this one. I think I'm definitely going to be rereading it again at some point in the future. And then the last book that I have finished for winter 2026 was Educated. And this is what made me realize I am for sure a memoir person because I ate this up. This is actually my boyfriend's library copy because he's still currently reading this. And I've already returned my copy. I initially started reading it actually as an audiobook, and then I ran out of listening hours on Spotify, so I started reading like 70% in. I started reading the physical copy that my boyfriend was starting, and I realized that reading the physical copy was so much better. There's so much detail and depth that you get from reading the words rather than like hearing them. This is like one of my favorite books now. I cannot speak more highly of this. I am genuinely so obsessed with the story. After reading a couple chapters, I just wanted to keep reading more and more and more to the point where I had to literally force myself to slow down a little bit towards the end because I just didn't want the experience to end. This memoir follows a survivalist family in Idaho. The father does not believe in traditional schooling, so he doesn't send his kids to public school, but then they also aren't really learning a lot at home either. So this is a story of one of the children going to college anyway, and then eventually getting a PhD. It's a very interesting story about reckoning with two different worlds. I think it's changed my worldview on a lot of stuff, and it's made me really think about how to be open to new ideas and perspectives. Literally a life-changing book. I would recommend this to everyone. I actually wish that I could read this again for the first time. That was everything that I finished in winter 2026. Overall, I would say this winter 2026 was very productive for me in terms of reading. That is everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed this kind of chill, casual chat about just books that impacted me and books that I read recently. I will have links to my FABLE, my blog and writing website, and then my other social medias in the description below. Thank you so much for watching this far, and I will see you next time. Peace out. Welcome back to, wait, that sounded bad. The amazing books that or maybe not so amazing. I just want to wait, hold it up there. So, wait, let me put this back. It did in fact wreck me. Wait. Because I just don't think, because I wanted to